So without any further consideration, let me just say that our featured speaker of the week, or the month, or the year, is now ready to go. So Bruno is going to make some comments, and he's going to give a traditional talk on the chalkboard. So, okay, and once again, Bruno doesn't need an introduction, although we are very happy to celebrate. Bruno, thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much again for organizing this event and for all of you to be here. I have to say that usually when there's something in the honor of someone, the someone often does not talk. So it's supposed to be a vacation, rest time. Here I've been given 90 minutes. I've been trying to compress it and all this. So I decided to do something a bit different because usually I have short talks and plenty of slides, too many slides. So here it's a longer time with 0 slides. So hopefully it will be a better pace. I remember it was a few years ago, actually I was giving a talk at IMPA on numerical portfolio, and the equipment had a problem, so I had to go to the blackboard, whiteboard here, and I remember that Georges told me, oh, actually it's so nice because it's a more human rhythm, actually. So here I will use it moderately. But first of all, yeah, so again, it's very kind to invite me for this 60th birthdays. To be 60, it's quite interesting because supposedly you've done enough things to have something to tell. Hopefully you still have golden years ahead to do interesting things again. But mostly it's we have to cherish the fact of being alive at the age of 60. I'm saying this because unfortunately I've seen different friends and family who did not reach this age. And so it's, I think that we really have to cherish anything that comes after that, and mostly to humbly thank for the fact that life still carries on for us. So I will go through my personal journey, so in a kind of more anecdotal way than the talks, technical talks that you already have this morning and we'll have later on. There will be a few formal elements anyway. But if you don't mind, I go back to my not childhood, but let's say teenage. Have a very old friend by the back door, Hugues. Hugues, say hello, please. So he's the one I've been knowing here for the longest time. So I think it's back to 75, so you can count this. And Hugues is leaving in a few minutes, unfortunately, for a plane to catch. Another one is Raphael, here another teenage friend of more than 40 years. So that's a definition, by the way, if you're not 60. And the first time I saw Raphael, he was on top of a tree in a Louis le Grand courtyard trying to catch a ball. So after we became friends, and I really want to thank him for having been so patient in the early years and contributing to my mathematical education. So I did many different scientific activities, studies, and applied in different ways. So in actually economics and artificial intelligence, I will go back briefly to this, experimental psychology, immunology, math applied to fluid dynamics. Actually, this was my golden time here in Rio. So actually in '82, after having graduated, done my master's degree in artificial intelligence in Paris, obviously as I love to travel, I would go abroad for a PhD. Natural choice would have been California, but I saw that, like, for instance, George, who did it at Berkeley. But I realized that everybody was doing this, so I decided to do something more adventurous, and I went to Brazil, although, or maybe because, I didn't know anyone. So it was more really to start afresh. And so I had fantastic years, and from 82 to 85 at the PUC, so which is the biggest private university in Rio. I remember I gave 1 or 2 conferences, actually at IMPA at the time, but my base was PUC. 82, 85 was a very interesting time because it was a transition from dictatorship to democracy, and and you know what's happening now, so yeah. So it's interesting.
Hopefully not.
Yeah, hopefully not. Let us see. But had a very, very interesting years here. What I did after, so I did a few things after going back to Paris, working for a science museum to give them mathematical ideas that could be converted into games. And in it was 86, 87, I found myself in a very interesting group headed by the late Francisco Varela, who was a kind of guru of self-organizing systems. And in that group, we are looking at very interesting things, very varied, like the perception of the color for the pigeon, bigger chromatic space, where studying the dynamics of the immune system, and we started working actually with neural nets. So this was really early stage. And after I realized that actually you could go beyond the classical sort of lingo jargon of selectively learning, automatically or selectively forgetting, generalizing, and just as a mathematician, you look at it as something, a system that minimizes an error function, and it could be, and you think of situations where it could be applied. And so I thought, okay, maybe we could try to learn the future from the past. Could be useful, I don't know, maybe for horse racing, and I will go back to this kind of things a bit after, but more directly, maybe to financial time series. So I applied it to, it was in 87, to forecasting the FX time series. And I sold the study to Caisse de dépôt and consignation, which is the biggest French governmental financial agency. And so I finished it in 88, and it seems it was the first time it was ever applied to it, and it became much more popular a few years after it went through the what's called the winter of AI, where people were giving up before it started again with a vengeance around let's say 5 years ago. But it was my sort of first foray into finance in some sense, and a bit after, early 88, I had a friend, François-Marc Durand, who is now associated at Lazare. He told me, Bruno, you have financial instruments starting. You probably never heard about it, but you will find it very interesting and very easy. So it was the beginning of the futures and option, something called a MATIF in France. And so I started looking a little bit, and he arranged an interview at Drexel Pargesa, which was a subsidiary of Drexel Burnham Lambert, infamous bank. So you know the Michael Milken scandals, and so it went bankrupt a bit after. But just about the interview, I was not exactly equipped for this. I mean, scientifically, I had no clue, but sartorially, as we say, I was not. So actually, he was very kind to lend me his coat to go to the interview, and I found a tie, but I had never tied a tie. I didn't know. So actually, I called my mother on the phone, and she tried to explain me how to tie a tie. That's very difficult, and I failed. She had to come. So I went there with the coat and the tie, so I was hired. It was very interesting. So actually, I was working part-time there and working on some arbitrage strategies because the convergence of the bond market and the futures, and so it was linked to options on the bonds and options on the future to combine this. Another anecdote of that time, so actually even if for the interview I was well dressed, I had a long hair, a bit Raphael type, if you want, yeah. And one day, I don't know why, I cut it a bit short, yeah. And so the boss looked at me a bit worried. He said, I hope you will still be good. Right. Hein? No, it was Jean-Michel Garnier of Drexel Pagesa. After the whole thing closed down in the wake of the Drexel scandal, and I worked for a stockbroker called Odo. I tried to go quite quickly on the things. It was around 89, 90. And one interesting thing, though, it was at some stage, a trader came to me and to say, yeah, it's strange. It was the Gulf War 1 or 2 or something like that. And he said, the options actually all the options are expensive now because of the perception of risk, but especially on the index, the CAC 40, and much more than on the individual stocks, to the point that the average implied volatilities, the money volatilities, the liquid ones, yeah, of the stocks were higher than the implied volatility of the index. It's what you would call now an implied correlation above 1. So a typical arbitrage in that case is that you buy the cheap individual options and you sell the expensive one on the index, and you can make some premium, you pocket the premium difference, and on top of it you have positive intrinsic value at the end. So that was an interesting arbitrage at the time. I did something anecdotally at that time. Also, it was looking at the sport, the betting market. How was it? Yeah, I remember back in '89, I was looking at watching on the television the final of the Roland Garros, the tennis tournament. It was Michael Chang against Stefan Edberg, and Edberg was losing, but I thought, no, now he will bounce back, but I'm not sure he will win the whole thing. I thought, oh, it would be great if I could buy Edberg and to sell him after. But the betting market at that time was quite limited. There were basically two ways. It was English bookmakers, yeah, 4-1 on a horse, yeah, or it was futures market, but only on kind of continuous quantities. People thought that you needed something that evolves continuously to have a futures market on it, like the weight of a Lady Di's baby, Prince William at the time. So no one really cares. Or for the World Cup, the Soccer World Cup, it was a bet on the total number of goals scored or yellow cards, and no one really cares. They want to bet on the team, yeah. And after I thought a little bit, I thought about who cares? You just have to define a contract, a settlement rule that says that if this or that happens, this is a payment. So you set the contract, and after you negotiate the contracts before. So I did it with in 1990 at Odo, the stockbroker. So actually, I should have done it at the time on the spreadsheet, but I was maintaining a market-making whiteboard like this, where typically you could buy or sell different players with the simple rule that the winner of the tournament would end up at $100 and all the other ones at 0. So you can buy basically the probability of winning, but so you can buy or sell short. You can buy and then sell later, as opposed to a 4-1, which is one way and until the end. There was no obvious favorite, maybe Agassi at that time, but it was not like the Borg years or Nadal now. So typical average player would have a bid offer of something like 5 to 8, or smaller ones 3 to 5, or bigger ones 8 to 12, but no one above 20%. So I started offering the prices. So on a market, normally for each asset, you try to balance the buyers and the sellers. But you realize that for this kind of games, very few people want to sell, actually. People have their personal favorite, or whenever they think of someone, they tend to overestimate the chances. So people were mostly buying, which is a bit problematic, but not that much, because obviously there will be only one winner, so you can diversify it across the other ones. So it was very interesting exercise to balance the things. And as people were mostly buying, so I was shifting both the bid and the offer, until I saw that a guy was starting to sell me everything. I thought, shit, yeah, the sum of the bids is above 100. I am getting arbitraged. Yeah, so I corrected it, yeah. And so it was going all fine, except that I became suspicious when the guy told me, oh, no, I think I will sell whoever. And then I realized that the match was underway, and so he was trying to, you're not supposed to bet during the match. And a couple of days after, I received a phone call saying, yeah, here is Fabrice Dimiglio from Caisse de dépôt and consignation. I thought, shit, yeah, I was suspecting that maybe it was not really legal, and that, yeah, there would be something. So he tells me, I know that you're running a kind of market making on this, yeah? So I would like to buy 5 contracts of Edberg. And after, more and more people were calling, so I told the guy, okay, you will be my counterpart, so you centralize and yeah, to simplify. And a couple of days after, he says, I'm very proud to say that Caisse des dépôts and consignation is the first one to start option contracts on it. I thought, God, I did not even think of it, yeah. And we were at the level of the semi-final, so 4 players, including the French Lecomte. It was around 20% at the time. And the at-the-money option price, they were betting it was something 4 to 6. So the right to buy Lecomte at 20. But then I thought, come on, if I buy the option at a strike of 20%, so it means that if Lecomte wins the tournament, he will end at 100 and minus strike 20, so I get a payoff of 80 and 0 if he loses. If I buy the share Lecomte, it would be 100 or 0. So 80 or 0, 100 or 0. So actually the option was 80% of the stock in that case. A very simple binomial tree, yeah. And so it means that the theoretical price should have been 16. So I bought plenty of Lecomte options and hedged on the spot market. So you learn a lot of things like this. In later a few years after at Paribas, we are doing a bit the same thing. Some people wanted to have exotic trades on it, like a contract that gives 100. If the 2 winners, male, women, and female, have already been in the final the year before, so we had to compute the cross hedge of Steffi Graf. Now that was, you learn a lot of things by doing this. After this, I went to Société Générale, and in 91 and 92, those were really extremely intense years. And a couple of days after I started in January 91, a trader came to me and said, oh, I have a deal, it's a forward start option. So the right, it's an at-the-money forward start option. So typically, like, let's say, in 1 year, the strike will be set and it will define the spot price will define the strike of a call option maturity 3 months after that time. So the guy said, it seems, but it depends, it should depend on the value of the volatility in 1 year, at the money implied volatility. So it seems to be some notion of forward volatility. I mean, the guy, I think, mentioned the name, but the concept was not existing at the time. And so he said, so the idea is that if at time t1, you're at time t0, if at time t1 you set the strike for an option maturing at time t2, it depends on basically the uncertainty between t1 and t2. So the guy said it's a bit like the forward rates. If you want to lock in an interest rate over a forward period, then you should buy and sell and borrow and lend on the 2 periods to secure the thing. So the guy said, I'm going to buy an at-the-money straddle maturity T2 and sell an at-the-money straddle maturity T1. So it means, in this case, so if I put the maturity line here, and so this is, let's say, T1 and T2, and the spot price is here, 0. So you may arrive wherever here, but the hedge in that case was to do it with at the money. Basically, it was to buy a call like this and to sell a call, let's say, like that, at the S0 strike. The problem is that if you arrive close to the money here, you will have a lot of convexity due to this option, which will be close to the money. But if you're far out in the money or out of the money, you will be on the linear part of the payoff. And so it means with no sensitivity to the volatility that will be prevailing at that time. So I said, okay, to maintain an exposure to volatility that does not really depend on the spot price here, actually, you should not only do this calendar spread here by the T2 and selling the T1 on one strike, but actually on the whole collection of strikes to maintain constant exposure to the volatility through this curvature that would be everywhere. So after I started formalizing this a little bit, and eventually it became a paper called Arbitrage Pricing with Stochastic Volatility in '92 with a revised version '93 and a simplified version in September '93 in Risk Magazine called Model Art. But the idea is the following. So I just go through a couple of equations and one that I will recycle for a couple of purposes after. So if you just assume that, let's say you have the spot price, some drift here, I don't risk neutralize it yet, plus, let's say, stochastic, possibly stochastic volatility here. Now if I have a certain function f of s, for simplicity I don't put the time here, I do something very simple. I just apply Ito's lemma between T1 and T2. So it tells me that Ft2 minus Ft1 so will be, so I just have 2 terms here. So the first order derivative plus the famous Ito term here. As to dt here. So this is quite interesting because actually this quantity here corresponds to the payoff of f at time t2. As you know, it can be reconstituted as a portfolio of options of different strikes, with the coefficients being the second derivative, by the way, minus the same portfolio but of options maturing at T1. So this is a portfolio of options you can buy and sell today at a known price. Here it will be interpreted as a delta hedge, and this is really the volatility sensitive term. If you have, for instance, a simple case where there is no carry term, so it means no interest rates, dividends, repo. So we know that this is self-financing, so the cost of it will be 0. If there is some carry terms, so it's still something that you can compute. Actually, for each intermediate small t, it will correspond to actually possibly another portfolio of options. But to make it simpler, let's consider the case of no carry. So we just pay attention to this term here. So here you see that actually, if you pick a nice f, like for instance, if you take f of s equal, let's say here I take minus 2 log of s. So f prime of s here will be minus 2 over s. F double prime will be 2 over s squared. So I do it to cancel with this and that. So in this case, this will become just integral between t1 and t2 of sigma squared dt. So here it's a way to get something, to extract something that depends only on volatility, independently of the spot value, which is what many people have been trying to do or are doing now. Every time we talk about volatility as an asset class, it really relies on this ability of separating the volatility component from the spot component. So at that time, so here it's in this paper, APSB, arbitrage pricing with stochastic volatility. So this was the first building block to show that it was possible to trade volatility. Back in '87, there were a few papers on stochastic volatility, basically saying, the thing is that you have now two uncertainties, one of the stock, the Brown of the stock itself, and the second one of the volatility component. The problem is that we can only trade the stock, so we can cancel, we can risk neutralize basically the first Brownian, but not the second one. We need to make some assumptions on some risk premium. Here, so I showed that it was possible to do actually trade volatility, and typically looking at what happens when you go to the limit of T1 going to T2.
Bruno, just a question.
Yes.
From here, you can get the Vix Hedging Portfolio, right? You're almost there.
I mean, here, let's say this is a fixed portfolio of options, and here it's a dynamic trading. This would be, so options. And the rest is the delta hedge here. And here it's a delta hedge in a model-free way, just following exactly the F, or it would be the delta in the model actually with 0 volatility, because that's the delta you would have by doing that. So when you have a T2, if you take now T2 that goes to T1 and you divide by it, so again, here you can write this thing here as a portfolio of options with the delta hedge. So it means with things with known cost, you're able to manufacture this quantity, to synthesize this quantity here. And now you can do it with T1 going to T2 to get this notion of instantaneous forward variance, which is something purely depending on the carry assumptions, but otherwise only on the current implied volatilities. So when you do this, you manage to create the instantaneous variance. I think I was calling it like this. So it means computed at time small t for the maturity capital T. So now you can make assumptions on how it's moving, like log normal stuff like this. Let's say alpha dt plus beta dw dz, rather another Brownian motion, possibly correlated with the one of the spot price. And now the trick is that as we did manage to trade, actually, to synthesize the volatility, the forward variance, so in other words, you can pretend that it is tradable because you can rebuild it. If someone trades at a different price, you can arbitrage. So you get, as it is tradable here, so it means that you know the risk neutral dynamics, so V has to be a martingale. And now you can make different assumptions on beta. Beta could be a stochastic process, for instance. So let's say it could have been something like this. But if you don't want to go too far, and just here we just want to add one complexity and not more than that, we can take beta as being a function of T and T. So what I showed in the paper is that if you want to have a Markov specification of this, because it helps your life for anything numerical, then it has to be a function like this, a function of T times the exponential between small t and cap T of lambda of S ds here. Now, if on top of it you want your model to be stationary, so it means it depends only on T, it's a certain function of just of T minus T, then it means that it has to be equal to B E lambda T minus T. So, which is the specification by Bergomi, so something like 15 years after Bergomi of SocGen did a second a model with two factors like this. Here it was just one factor. Many people go back to the one factor version to because it's simpler, notably with Julien has been working on it, for instance, with the rough volatility as well. Let's say this model was the first one to incorporate this tradable volatility. So it's important in a different number of directions because, okay, first it showed that you did not need always to put a risk premium on the volatility, but second, it was showing, actually it was the building block, the ancestor of two things that became very important on the market. Yeah, it's like what Marco mentioned in his video. So it was so the Vix, the formula of the Vix squared is computed as an approximation of this logarithmic profile, so computed from option prices you know now. The second thing, it's the mechanism to replicate variance swaps. Okay, so after that, I mean, I'm spending some time on it because most people would pay attention to local volatility. In my view, I think those two pieces of work, and there were a few months apart, are pretty much of similar importance, actually. So after I did, at that time, we did in a couple of years, really in 91, 92, a lot of things. I don't go too much into details because I think that, for instance, Antoine will mention this. There was, okay, I looked at different things, like one thing that was I judged to be very important, it was the notion not only of the price, but the price and the risk. Because, for instance, you had the barrier options. You had somewhere very reasonably nice. So you have the strike here. Here's the spot price. And here it's a barrier at a limit level L. So it's a down and out call here. It's a standard call option, except that you lose it if you ever reach this level. This makes a lot of economic sense, and it's a notion I will go back to in the future because a recurrent theme for me, at least, it's also the proper use of derivatives. So So it means it's not only a mathematical exercise or a way to sell things to people who don't need it, but capturing profit on the way. No, it's really, those derivatives are supposed to serve a purpose. When we talk about financial engineering, it's supposed to bring solutions to existing problems, to people who have different exposures, like FX exposure or commodity. And here, for instance, let's say if you import, for instance, if you're in Brazil and you import American goods and you have to pay in dollars, your problem is to have the dollar going up. To protect yourself, yeah, you may buy a call option. It has some cost. You may reduce the cost by having a more fragile option that will disappear if the spot price goes down. But here, you don't really mind. If this scenario happens, if you hit the barrier, it means that actually you can buy the currency at a low price. So you have the ability of securing a good price. So that's, I would say, a good option. It has an economic sense, and it's related to the mathematical smoothness of it as well. Actually, the price of the option will be something like this. So with some angle here, but a small one. I'm saying this as opposed to so this is the down and out call option. And its dark brother is actually the up and out option, which means that the barrier is in the money here. It's an option that would disappear when you need it most, as opposed to this one which disappears when you don't really need it anymore. So in that case, the price of it will be something like that. And at maturity, if you have still not hit it, but you're close to it, you face a huge discontinuity. So this makes very little sense economically. Still, people like the price of it because it looks very cheap due to a couple of reasons. One is that, anyway, the payoff is bounded. Second one, even if you had a payoff like this the European way, so it means without the barrier at an old point in time, it has the highest payoff when the density is quite low, so it's not so expensive. And third, actually, it's very rare that you do get a high value, because if you end up close to there, probably you've lost the option before. So people like it, and even if it should be, it's a financial crime almost, yeah, to promote that. So it should be not encouraged. But mathematically, I mean, for the trader, it does create a lot of more trouble, as opposed to the other one where you have a smooth hedge. Again, here you can have an infinite concentration of risk at the end. Still, the dealers were quoting kind of similar bid offer for those two things. So I thought, okay, one thing is within a model to compute a fair price, but the bid offer should definitely depend on the risk of the option. Because if you're a trader and you have much more trouble or model uncertainty here, so you should reflect it in the bid offer. So I looked at it and I thought, okay, a simple criterion to define a risk. I mean, a first approach, you may do it in many different ways, but the guy was hedging the option. So what kind of uncertainty does he have? I looked first at a simple case. When the model is very simple, it's just Black-Scholes, constant volatility. But you don't, okay, if you were in Black-Scholes and continuous hedging, even if it's a path-dependent option, you have a perfect hedge. But if it's a complete market, but if you can only hedge every day, for instance, at the end of the day, then it becomes an incomplete model, and you have a residual risk. When you work through it, you see that it depends along one path on typically the gamma you have every day, so on the integrated gamma, and when you aggregate over plenty of paths, you see it depends on the average average cumulative gamma. So the options with more gamma have more risk. You can do the same thing with another source of incompleteness, like stochastic volatility model, but where you can only hedge with the spot price. Then the second Brownian, wherever here, comes into play. And you see that the notion of risk depends now on the average vega of the option, of the decorrelated component. But so I've been doing all this for different kinds of options, and anecdotally, I was using actually the functionality of calculus without knowing, without thinking it was a problem, and many years after, so 10 minutes out of 90? Okay. Oh, yeah, we tried it. Okay, I go faster. So, and I expanded this into a notion called the H square, which was the ability to hedge an option with other things. Well, I'm going to stop to jump over quite a few things. So as I had put in my working title, that I was going to talk about what? Yes, local volatility. Yeah. Here we can use this. Okay. I worked on local volatility initially in the summer of '92. Together with an intern and doing a trinomial tree version of it. It was loosely inspired actually from neural nets, where actually you try to learn to teach the net, a linear net in this case, but with constraints, the price of different profiles. So the features in the machine learning lingo, so which means how the input would be the profile, the values of the profile, and the output or the label would be the market price. And you can you tune the different connections to fit this input-output relationship. And you can do it explicitly, so it's what I had been doing at the time, but I was wondering whether this was converging to something proper, because if you do it, let's say, with weekly time steps, you compute your connections, you build your trinomial tree, you price an option, a barrier option, for instance, you get a 4%, but after when you redo it with daily time steps, and you reprice, you recalibrate and reprice the same option, you get 2%, so you get worried. So the question is obviously to know whether it does converge to something proper. So for this, I needed the continuous time theory, so which I did in early '93. First time I presented it, it was the first time I met actually Robert Merton. It was in France, in La Baule, in June '96, actually. At the time, so I had done it through the Kolmogorov equation, so the forward, by integrating twice the forward Kolmogorov equation, which dictates how the density seen from one point are evolving through time. After I realized, I went through, I think I got something like 7 different proofs. I just do a very simple one that is based on this one. Okay, first, for instance, if you take this thing being a sigma of ST, I do it in the simple case again of the no carry term, so this has no price here. If I define, let's say, Ft being the expectation at time 0 of the profile, that gives me that here. The maturity T profile, F profile here. So I look at the present value of this equation here. So here it will be Ft2, the price today of this profile, maturing T2, minus T1. The price of this is 0. And now here I have, so I will have let's say, let me write it like the PV. I don't take an expectation. I don't price by expectation here. I just look at the cost of the thing. Interestingly, by the way, it gives you notably the Black-Scholes formula, without really using hedging arguments or risk neutral or arbitrage argument, more an accounting principle, but it gives you the same result. Here of the integral 21T2 of, so I just rewrite the thing here, a square dt here. If I go to the limit here, and I divide by T2 minus T1, I get this here, the derivative here, and here it will be, so the price, yeah, the PV of actually here. Sorry? PV, present value. So what is the value today of receiving at time t this thing here? And actually, if now I do it with F, which is a call option of a strike K, FTKT here. So it will be, this will be a Dirac here, KT of ST. And so what I get, it is and this was sigma of ST here. So here with the Dirac, it means it captures the value only when you're exactly there. And so what you get, it is, so you get PV of the square here, of the Dirac here, which would be the risk neutral probability of being there, times sigma square of KT here. And this is actually the second, as you know, second derivative of the call price with respect to this. So you get eventually that DC over half this. I still have the K square here, K square. So which is what is called the forward equation or my equation. And as you said, which is usually used by taking, expressing this as a function of the rest. So if you have a proper smooth interpolation, yeah, you can get this and use this model to price more complicated options. It's what most banks are doing or have been doing, interestingly. So it's a small mathematical exercise that gives an equation, but that has an impact in the sense that it seems that several trillions of dollars of notional have been traded on the back of it. It looks a lot, but actually you have 700 trillions a year, so which means that in a cumulative way, probably Black-Scholes is quadrillions. So I have to carry on skipping, obviously. So what can I do? After, yeah, I went to Paribas. Yeah, I will do in private different anecdotes like the interview of Antoine as a stagiaire, as an intern. But two very important people I met at this time, so were Antoine Savine and Guillaume Blachier. Both are here and will present later, because after an internship, so they were very good, so I gave them full-time employment. And after, when I moved to Nikko Financial Product, so I took them with me and we carried on both friendship and the scientific interaction throughout all the years. So at Paribas, we did a lot of things. Working on the interest rate models, improvements of the Chayet models. We developed the jumping numeraire, which is what Jamshinian calls the spot numeraire, but I think we did that before. But carry on this thread of volatility. So I tackled an issue which was how to combine the two things I showed here. Because initially, the arbitrage pricing with stochastic volatility, it was a stochastic volatility model, but without, that was fitting actually the term structure of volatilities, of variance swaps more precisely, but not exactly the skew. The local volatility model was a deterministic volatility model that was fitting the whole market, but it was not stochastic. So the question was how to have a stochastic volatility model that fits the whole surface. So the way I did it, it was an easier Morton-like approach, but that was actually modeling the evolution of all the local variances. And I showed that it was possible actually to interpret the local variances, so the square of the local volatilities, not only as a parameter to fit the market, but as a quantity you can lock in, that you can trade. So it gained the status of a forward quantity, more precisely a forward variance, instantaneous forward variance, conditional on the spot value in the future. And this makes a lot of difference because it means it has many applications, like lately, yeah, so for instance, Julien was looking at the joint calibration of the Vix options with the S&P options. So you see in simplified cases, like if the Vix was instantaneous and not a 30-day reference. So actually, you could use this approach to selectively trade actually conditional variances to arbitrage, to have an explicit arbitrage when mathematical properties are violated. So just the anecdote, it was in '94, I was by a swimming pool in Miami when I was thinking again of this thing here and saying, actually it means that the local variance here, I can write it as twice calendar spread, actually. Calendar spread, it means it's the time derivative of the call price with respect to the maturity divided by a certain number of butterfly spreads, which is a very sharp butterfly here, you know, by combining three strikes here, which approximates the Dirac. And I thought, yeah, but actually it means that local variance is the price of a portfolio of options expressed in terms of another portfolio of options. So if I took this one as a numeraire, so it means that it will be a martingale with respect to the risk-neutral measure associated to this numeraire, even if it's a degenerated one, because it converts to one thing, but actually it became explainable as a conditional expectation, actually, showing that. So actually, I showed how to combine different options, and it was leading notably to this equation here. So it was back in '95, the circulating version of the Unified Theory of Volatility paper, which was combining all this. It was January '96. It was showing that you could compute, a model was calibrated to the market if and only if the instantaneous variance conditional to this was equal to the local variance. So I know that many people now call it the Gyeonggi result. You mentioned Gyeonggi as well. But let's say the UTV was the first paper establishing it. After you can find links with different things that other people did. It's like you may say, oh, Black-Scholes, but it's a heat equation. But what is important is to establish things. So that was a kind of combination of the different approach of before. So to carry on speeding up, so mostly something fundamental in my time at Paribas London, beyond this fantastic team I had, is that I had a great pleasure to meet my wife. My wife is in the back there. Back in '95. Because she has been an incredible support for all this time. So it has been a privilege to really meet her. And she has really pushed me all the times it was difficult or needed to make me progress, both as a human being and as a father of those two beautiful children. So I think you can applaud them. Hey, children, stand up, please. Stand up. Hey, yeah. Yeah. And yeah, she has been an incredible support and motivation. So thank you again, Cecilia. So after that, I know I'm starting to steal back my minutes, but yeah. So after, yeah, I worked on the different things that I called at the time the Sigma0 method. I think that Antoine will cover that, but it's typically volatility expansions that allows you to derive a lot of different properties, and one of them, for instance, Jim has very kindly sort of written on it and put it in his beautiful book in 2006 of on the volatility smile, but typically getting the property that implied volatility can be seen as a quadratic average of the local volatilities with a weighting scheme, which is essentially the gamma times the density, a bit like a Brown bridge density. It leads to some approximations on which some of which Jim has been working on and integrating through the most likely path, for instance. After Nico, I did quite interesting theoretical things. One was I just write the equation because it's a Martingale equality or inequality if it's not continuous, and I applied it personally during the crisis of 2008, during the crash. Basically, the idea was to buy more and more of the index when it goes down, and I did it almost until the bottom of it when she told me, "But Bruno, don't you see it's going to go to zero? Stop that." But still, it became quite an interesting and profitable thing. So it's another way to make money out of an equation. I was just analyzing what happens when you buy more and more every time it drops, and eventually it led to this Martingale inequality. That's the stock price. Here it's the minimum over the period. So it's called the draw up here, being equal actually to ST. This interesting thing, and if it's discontinuous, actually you have an inequality here. So it's something that you get from this strategy, and it gave her some inspiration also about understanding what you can replicate with options or not, because it means that this can be seen as a parabolic profile, which is a combination of options with a proper associated hedge. So after I retired or had a sabbatical for a few years in this beautiful medieval village in the south of France, still, it's also at that time that I got a couple of, this Risk Hall of Fame awards, and eventually, with a combination of different job opportunities, one of them presented by Raphael, there were different possibilities in London and New York, and eventually I accepted after my wife said, even if you don't want to work, look, they pay you combined 1 week of vacation in New York. So just go there, say no, but let's go there. And eventually they were not too bad. So I said, okay, let's do 1 year at Bloomberg. I told my friends in the south of France, we're back in 1 year. If you want to visit us, hurry up. But after 1 year, I was, I'm still there. Almost 15 years. To keep it short, so I have a very nice team here. We have also Mohamed of the team, and obviously Julien Guyon. So there we've been working on a lot of different things. So it's there that I cleaned up the functionality of calculus, so I don't go back to it. It was very well presented. Even if, there are new results, like, for instance, this characterization of attainable claims, to have a rule, a specific algorithm to decide whether something can be attained by dynamic trading in a model-free way, or a combination of dynamic trading and static position of options. I did something very interesting in 2011, 2012. I think it was just before Julien came, and he never got to see the details, but it was a kind of possibility of organizing the markets in a different way. I know I'm still in, but just very quickly. If you have one market, you have the order book, one stock, let's say, you have buyers and sellers, and prices move, and when bid and offer meet, then you have a trade, it carries on moving. Now, if you have different markets at the same time, so you may have this asynchronous way, but very often people want to trade not only one stock, but a spread or a combination of different futures, portfolio of options. They want to do global trades. So I found a way to maximize actually those joint markets together by basically having a system where anyone can post an order for one bundle of different securities, one-sided order, I buy or I sell, and each one is actually inducing a new set of price for any possible other bundles. And a trade is done when you have an arbitrage, so it means super replication of zero with a negative cost. So it's a very, very nice approach. I did it with Shakri Cherukuri and Arun Verma as well. So other things, it was this proper use of derivatives and trying to evangelize in the limits of my capacities, different people on the market to say that things should be done properly. And we built a tool called alignment. You have to try to align the solution to the problem of the person. And interestingly, when I looked at it and eventually I applied it, it was really applying all this maximization of expected utility in an really applied way. I realized that very often the solution was not with derivatives, but mostly with just forwards. And I don't have time to expand so much on it, but it gave me some insight of behavioral economics, and I developed a remote theory at this time, and now I'm going to be kicked out of the thing. Just currently, at Bloomberg, we do plenty of very interesting things, and we create this new quant platform called bQuant, where we have a very rich set of tools, libraries, and ways to interact with the data, to visualize the data. We even do science fiction stuff, like with Mohammed, the 4D project. It's inspired by Minority Report with Tom Cruise, if you know if you've seen this. At some stage, he's moving images around virtually and to combine things. We do this. You sit in front of the computer, you don't touch anything, you move the hands, and you navigate in a four-dimensional space of, which is very important for any time you do data science, because you have many dimensions. So you can navigate in a four-dimensional space of stocks, for instance, and inspect the neighbors. It's fascinating. And I'm quite finished. So obviously, along the way, I had the pleasure to initiate this series, and which has been brilliantly carried on by IMPA, and an incredible support of all the people. So let's say I gave some impact to start with, and now it's I think we can say it's a bit with Marco, but mostly with Georges and Sueli, that everything is possible. And before we applaud them, I just wanted to say it's very important to try to do things that can benefit the community in general, and I just give you 2 examples of things we are trying to do. We currently have a project for assistive technologies, which is adapting things we've done to optimize the access, the navigation through the data and all this, to have a system where we can we help people who have like let's say Steve Hawking's, who have very limited mobility, or for instance, who can only click, how to write a text in an optimal way. My own sister died of ALS 15 years ago. At the end of her life, she could only write emails by clicking with the chin. So you had the virtual keyboard with the lines and the rows being highlighted. You click it, and after you click the letter in it, very painful. So we have things much better now. And to finish, another initiative, it's a World Quant University. So also with Peter Carr and Alex Lipton, we unfortunately are not here. So we are on the advisory board. It's the first online, free, accredited master's degree. So it's currently in quantitative finance, but they are going to do it in data science and plenty of other things. So in short, we are in a field where we can do very interesting things. We can get some rewards for it, but I think it's very important also to give back as much as you can. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruno. Fantastic talk. Bruno, well, this was a very nice introduction and overview of his career so far, introduction to what comes next, although what comes next is not in our Sigma algebra right now. Bruno, thank you again. Perhaps I'll take 1 or 2 comments. I'm going to filter out the comments of Raphael. Poor Raphael, so anyone would like to say a few things or ask a question? If not, no, okay, nobody wants to say anything. Huh? Yes, we have lunch, yeah, people are, yeah, but before we go for lunch, I wanted to mention that we have the dinner party tonight, and again, don't forget to carry your badge. If you don't have a badge and you'd like to go to the dinner party, please talk to Sueli. And we are going to resume at the normal time, which is something like 2 p.m. And with that, well, thank you again for being here.